Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first event of the Untold Talks webinar series. My name is Lena Duke, and I'm founder of Untold. We launched on International Women's Day, March 8th, 2020, to empower women to own, tell, and share their stories. We believe that when you share your story, you empower other people to share theirs, but you also amplify your voice and your message. We feature women's stories of inspiration and empowerment, leadership, social impact, overcoming challenges, but we also provide resources and tools like this webinar to help women use storytelling and incorporate storytelling to develop an authentic voice. I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Imogen Ko, award-winning scientist and great storyteller, as my co-presenter today. I'd like to thank our partners, Ontario Tech Trend Women in Tech, Women in Chem, and Women in Science at Ontario Tech for collaborating with us on this event. Before I turn the mic over to Lydia Salim from Ontario Tech, who sits on both these groups, I'd like to go over the Zoom rules. You have the option throughout the event to raise your hand and submit your questions at any time. 15 minutes has been allocated at the end of the event for Q&A. If you raise your hand, we might call upon you to share your question live. In this case, please make sure to unmute yourself, and if you do like, you can also turn on your camera. We encourage you to participate, actually. You can also submit your questions in the chat box. This is done by clicking on the 3 dots in the control box. You also have the option to submit your questions anonymously. This event is being recorded and will be shared to all our platforms. Now, feel free to live tweet throughout the event. Please use the hashtag UntoldGlobal. And now I'd like to turn over the mic to Lydia Salim, who is a PhD candidate at Ontario Tech University.
All right, thank you so much, Lena, and everyone welcome on behalf of Ontario Tech Women in Science and the Ontario Tech Trends Women in Chemistry groups. For those of you who are joining from different communities and are not familiar with our groups, our mission, although we're kind of based at 2 different institutions, Ontario Tech and Trends, it's really similar. So it's really to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in science. We also really, as part of our mission, try to amplify women's voices and provide opportunities for personal and professional development. So we're so excited to be collaborating with Untold, partly because their mission and roles is so in line with what we want to promote, but also because the specific topic of today's webinar really resonated with us. We think that storytelling is such a powerful tool, and what we really hope to do here is empower you to find your voice and use that voice to share your story and own it and be proud of it. So we're really looking forward to this webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and I'm gonna hand it over to Lena to introduce our first speaker.
Well said, Lydia. Thanks so much for this. And it's been a pleasure collaborating with you on this event. Our first presenter, my co-presenter, Dr. Imogen Ko. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to introduce her. Actually, Dr. Ko and I go way back when she was founding Dean of Science at Ryerson University, and we collaborated on social media, and she became a friend and a colleague, and I'm just so honored to be working with her, co-presenting with her. It's just thrilling to me. Dr. Ko is an award-winning scientist, science communicator, policy advisor, and advocate of EDI, that's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Science. She's founding dean, like I said, of Faculty of Science at Ryerson, and she's currently professor of chemistry and biology there. She's also an affiliate scientist at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. And she's also involved, she sits on the board of Science Rendezvous and the Canadian Mining Innovation Council. She's also a force to reckon with on social media. If you're not following her yet, please do. And she's just an amazing person to have in your life. And please go ahead, Dr. Ko.
Okay, well, thank you, Lena, for that amazing and very generous introduction. I'm delighted to be here, and you're right, we do go back a long way, and it's been a great collaboration. I've learned so much from you, and continue to learn all the time. So let's go. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, hopefully that has worked. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good. I have also included closed captioning, so you'll see that hopefully scrolling along the bottom of the screen, and I hope it's relatively accurate. So you've just had an introduction for who I am. There you are. You can find me on social media, and it's been a great way to tell stories, I have discovered, with the help of Lena. I'm also the incoming president for the Canadian Society of Molecular Biosciences, which is a science society in Canada with a priority about supporting particularly young researchers, and with a very strong commitment that will only get stronger as I become president around equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in science. I always start off my talks with where I do my work and the acknowledgement of the communities who have been in that part of the world for many thousands of years. So Ryerson University, it's in the heart of Toronto, which is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples have come into this treaty. I don't say invited, these are living documents, these land acknowledgements. People weren't always invited into this treaty. However, we can all learn from the guiding principles, which are the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And there is Joanne Dallaire, the Aboriginal elder and presidential advisor at Ryerson, holding up the wampum belt, which represents the treaty. And I think it's really important, and we have overlooked for far too long, the reality that storytelling is a core knowledge translation strategy among Indigenous nations, Indigenous peoples. Particularly for the transfer of very important ecological, environmental, societal knowledge across generations. So storytelling is a very important skill. It's a very important component of us communicating knowledge, communicating information, communicating principles. And there's a lot that we can learn from other peoples, from other parts of the world, and from other nations. This is my story in terms of where I've come from. So I started out in the UK, as you can tell from my accent, I think, still, maybe. I grew up in Cambridge. I went to a university down the southwest of the UK. Then I was in search of adventure. So I came to the west coast of Canada for my graduate work. Then I zipped down to San Francisco for a postdoc that involved ethanol addiction biology, up to Alberta for another postdoc on pharmacology, and then finally ended up in Toronto, where I've been for the last 20 odd years. During that time, I also spent some time in Oregon and in Hamburg, where I also did some research. So I consider myself to be kind of a global citizen. I have dual nationality. I'm a proud immigrant. And all of these adventures have informed who I am and informed my story. And so this is really what I'm known as, or what my journey led to, as me as a scientist, a research scientist, involved in research on drug uptake, doing all of the conventional things that research scientists do, which is publish papers. But part of my journey has also been the awareness that not everybody got to do what I was able to do. Not everybody has been able to follow their passion. Not everybody has been able to tell their own stories. So part of my role and part of my responsibility, really, because I've had so much privilege and I've been able to pursue and fulfill my passions. Part of my role then, and part of my aim has been to help other scientists, particularly young people, particularly people who maybe didn't feel like they had a voice, help them, teach them how to be storytellers. And this blog here, which is now from almost 4 years ago, is one of the first sort of public outreach sort of layperson pieces I wrote in with the help of Lena, in learning how to tell my story, how to help other people tell their stories. And so I can remember very clearly putting this out and feeling absolutely terrified at all the nasty things people were going to say, and then being devastated that actually nobody commented right away. And so it has been an interesting journey in terms of actually learning how to tell stories, or how to tell my story, or how to share things that I'm thinking. But we must do that. We, particularly women, we're kind of often reluctant to do this. We have expertise. We are experts. We have backgrounds. We have expertise in science. You may have noticed recently that many of the people being asked to comment about COVID-19 as experts have been men. And yet, interestingly, many of the public health leaders are women. So we are experts. We should be asked our opinion. We should offer our opinion. We should offer our comment. And that's really important that our voices are heard. There's an organization in Canada called Informed Opinions, whose goal is to amplify women's voices and achieve, work towards gender balance in the media, so that when the media is looking for an expert on something, there is a list of really highly qualified women that they can go to. Informed Opinions also offers training, and it's really important that we hear those voices. Social media is a great way of sort of democratizing communication. And here's something I did recently when everybody was buying toilet paper like crazy, and it was like, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I used social media and did a little Twitter thread here about what's going on with toilet paper. And, you know, it turned out to be quite popular. People picked it up. But it really was about telling a story, but it's informed by my expertise. It's also informed by the fact that I'm a mom, and I now have four adults living at home instead of the two, because we were empty nesters. And, you know, so, I mean, I think there are things that we all have that we can tell stories about. Those things that we have are informed by who we are. So I showed you the journey that I had made as a scientist, but I really want to emphasize the value and the importance of us being rich, diverse, complex people. And here is just some of the things in my life that go to inform the stories I tell, or things that I can tell stories about. So clearly I was the world's most beautiful baby. There is my wonderful dad who died last year, which was a very profound experience. We all share the experience of loss, and I did write about that. My kids, my parents, here's my wonderful siblings here. Here's some work I did with a senator in the government in Canada about science outreach and communication. I brought soapbox science to North America to amplify the voices of women. Wonderful work with young people. I love dogs, informs the way I feel about the world, all sorts of things that go on that are very valuable and important and enrich the things that I can talk about and the stories I tell. It's really important that we hear women's voices. It's really important that we hear the voices of people who otherwise are not being heard, because the people who take up the space, the people whose voices are often the loudest, are the people who often have power and privilege and make decisions and define policy. So, and that can be very, very problematic. So silence and powerlessness go hand in hand. Women's voices must be heard. And we must make space for scientists. I crossed out female here because here's a story for you. Scientist, the word, was defined for a woman. It was defined for Mary Somerville. She couldn't be called a man of science a couple of hundred years ago. So the person that was describing her used the equivalent of artist and called her a scientist. So really, there are scientists, and then there are male scientists. So we must make space for scientists' voices online, in the media, in person. We must make space for people whose voices are not being heard. And I try to be intentional about this myself. If I'm invited to a panel, is it all white women? Well, maybe we don't need another white woman's voice. Maybe I need to make space for somebody else. Is it all straight white people? We need to make space for people whose voices are not being heard. And we sometimes have to be really intentional about that. All of those people have stories to tell. They have lived experiences that can inform and enrich and make our lives better. They can make our decisions better. They can make our science better. people have ideas and innovative solutions. So that's one of my goals has been to amplify the voices of others, encourage people to tell their stories, use platforms like social media, encourage people to use their outside voices. I've been described as being outspoken, and I always correct people and say, no, I'm just spoken, not outspoken, I'm just spoken, that's all, and just telling a story. I think also, you know, life is short and there are important words that everybody has. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something important to contribute. And to be anxious and worried and you know, and worried and nervous about that, I think is such a shame, because there's so many important words that we just cannot have unsaid. And one of those stories, important things that needed to be said was something that I wrote last year after my dad had died. And it was really about gratitude, and he was a chemist, and it was the International Year of the Periodic Table. And I put it all together, and I put it out there. You know, I don't know what people are going to think, and I, like everybody else, I worry about what people will think. But everybody's got a, you know, many of us have got a shared experience of loss. And so, so it spoke to people, and people like to feel connected. So life is short. There's no time to leave important words unsaid. And every one of you has something of value. Every one of you has a story, something important to say, whether it's just to a small group or whether it's to the world. So be bold. Be brave and tell your story. Thanks, Lena, for the opportunity, and look forward to questions.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'll be sharing some practical tips on how to incorporate storytelling into your online brand and your online to develop a voice on social media. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
So yeah, that was interesting. So wanted to share the results with you that I got on LinkedIn as well. So most people, 38% said all of the above. We got not sure people care to know, 29%, and fear potential backlash, which Dr. Ko addressed, 16%. Not knowing how to do it well, this is what we're here for, to help you do it well. Just a little bit about myself. I'm founder of Untold. Now my day job is social media strategist. I work with academics like Dr. Ko and senior executives on their social media strategy. I help them implement social media to position themselves as thought leaders in their space. I speak often on social media. I've presented at universities around the world, spoken at Harvard, McGill, U of T, the World Communication Forum in Geneva a couple of years ago. I also write often on social media. I've been published in the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, CNN, the Globe and Mail, and other publications. This is my Twitter handle, Lena Duke MBA. If you're not following me already, please go ahead and I'll follow you back. What we'll learn today, I'm going to make the case for storytelling, sharing some numbers with you, how to use your story to amplify your voice, specifically how to incorporate that into your LinkedIn post, and how to use it on Twitter as well. And I'll share some practical examples with you. Now, if you're not already live tweeting, please go ahead and live tweet. This is our hashtag Untold Global, and this is my Twitter handle. This is Dr. Ko's handle. If you want more retweets, tag her, because if you tag, the more people you tag, the more engagement you'll get. And this is Untold Global, Untold_Global, our Twitter handle. Now, if you really want more engagement, use pictures in your tweets. Like you can take a screenshot of the slides, take a selfie of yourself while attending the webinar, whatever you like. Now, why storytelling? I think we've gone over these already, but wanted to put them down. Storytelling helps you connect with your audience, helps you communicate your message a lot more effectively, and of course, develop a unique voice, and it inspires others to do the same. Now, as part of sharing our accomplishments, which is part of sharing our story, I wanted to quote this article in the Harvard Business Review. They did a study with 16,000 men, or maybe a survey, I should say, over a period of 15 years. And they came out with a bunch of basically findings about the secrets of successful female networkers. And this really caught my attention in the article. The most successful women don't downplay their knowledge, skills, and accomplishments. They show evidence that they can do things. Now, some research from Catalyst, the organization that helps advance women's leadership, they have a significant Canadian presence as well. In 2011, they had a study, and they discovered that when women were proactive in making their accomplishments known, they advanced further, increased their compensation, and were more satisfied with their careers. Now, what is a story? Because sometimes people think when I say tell your story that you're supposed to kind of tell your life story. You don't have to tell your whole life story in a tweet, but what you can do, you can focus on an incident that took place to make a point. So I looked it up. Story is an account of incidents or events. Now, how can you incorporate that story into your social media posts? I have a great example to share with you. This is a LinkedIn post by Dr. Christine Allen. She's Associate VP and Vice Provost of Strategic Initiatives at University of Toronto. And on International Women's Day, she shared this post. I've been reflecting on mentorship lately. When I was doing my PhD in McGill, I hit a wall. That typically happens midway through the PhD journey. Many PhD students experience stress, anxiety, and depression. At the time, there were few female professors in the chemistry department at McGill. So I reached out to the graduate chair, Prof. Bruce Lennox, and asked if he would mentor me. He agreed, and that made all the difference. He ended up becoming a huge supporter of my career throughout my academic journey. In other words, he became and continues to be an ally. Allyship is critical. It's important to support each other as women, and we also need men as allies, partners, collaborators, so we can conquer gender bias together. What I really like about this story is that it's not too long, it's focused. The whole point of the story is to show that allyship is important, mentorship is important, sponsorship by other women and men is important, but it's a great way to pass on this information. It's a great way to communicate this message without sort of like broadcasting the information, saying, oh, allyship is important, we should all have mentors. This is a very engaging way to post, to communicate your message using story. And because she shared an incident, an experience that she has had, because she opened up, she's able to connect with audiences on a much deeper level. Now, Dr. Allen actually was kind enough to share the number of views on that post. I know it got a lot of engagement, but it actually got over 60,000 views on LinkedIn, which is amazing because I think she has under 5,000 contacts in total. So this is a really great example of using storytelling in a social media post. Our stories inspire others to share theirs. So I wanted to share with you an experience. I received this message a couple weeks ago. Says, hey there, hope you're doing well. Want just to let you know that I was inspired by you. So years ago, I shared my story to Lean In, leanin.org. At the time, they were soliciting stories, just like we are doing at Untold right now. And I posted, I submitted my story talking about the year that I did my MBA and had my baby, was working full time. It was a crazy year for me. But I thought this is really my lean in moment. So I talked about it in this article. And it caught the attention of somebody. And at the time she messaged me and reached out to me and said, this really inspires me. And I was really touched by it. But now, years later, she messages me to tell me, I can't believe that she still remembers the story, tell me that she's now completing her MBA with her 3-month-old baby. I was really touched by it. So I decided to share that, the fact that she reached out to me on LinkedIn. So I posted about it in the form of a story once again. And I said, one woman's story is another woman's inspiration. And I told the story of the one that I just told you right now in a LinkedIn post. And what I did, I tried to connect it to the reason I launched Untold, to help women own, tell, and share their stories. Because storytelling is a great way for you to actually be recognized in a specific area. In my case, I wanted to be, the go-to person for women's empowerment and storytelling. That story totally made sense for me to share. It could be about positioning yourself as an expert in a specific field, so you can use a story as well and connect it to the overarching message, which is really the one that guides your brand, your personal story, your narrative online. So I wrote this post and I said, which is why at the bottom, which is why I launched Untold, to help women own, tell, and share their stories. And I had the call to action. I think the call to action is really important. Share your story here. Anytime you post on social media, it's really important to think of what call to action you want to include. Do you want to ask a question? Do you want to direct people to a specific website? Don't miss out on the opportunity to get people to do something, because most times when you ask them to do it, they will do it. Sign up for this webinar, for example. Share your story here. Retweet if you agree. Give me a high five if you've had a similar experience. Once again, I got a lot of, I didn't get 60,000 views, but I got a decent amount of views on my post, over 2,200 views. So that was really good. Now, if you look at my post and Dr. Ellen's post, you'll see maybe some common themes. So in both cases, we use a story to convey a message about an area that, in my case, I'm passionate about. But notice also the writing style of that LinkedIn post. That phrase, space, phrase. I'm gonna go back to my post. So this is a really popular way of posting on LinkedIn. And always make sure that the first phrase is a catchy one. So in this case, one woman's story is another woman's inspiration. It could be something even more specific. I've had, I had a really great experience doing, XYZ, for example. Or I see posts by recruiters about, my friend was fired, or my friend quit the job yesterday. It just something that's really catchy. It draws you in and you want to learn more, you want to read more. So starting your post with a catchy phrase is really key. Writing threads on Twitter. So let's move over to Twitter. So how can you share a story on Twitter in the most effective way? Threads are really cool. They give you the opportunity to, and the space to tell your story, because you don't have to stick to the 280 characters. And I think Dr. Ko showed you the toilet paper thread, which was very timely at the time, and really, really interesting. So this is a tweet that we posted to Untold. It's a thread of a story. This is actually our first story by scientist Tina Grosso. And make sure always when you write a thread, include the word thread in the first tweet and make it your sort of like, this is the main tweet. The one where you want to include the hashtags. This is the one that will get the most retweets anyway. And you can include more tweets by hitting reply. So you just keep hitting reply. In this case, I was born and raised in Paris, Italian immigrant. So we basically told her story in a thread. And it's a great way to actually drive engagement, because tweets that have replies get more visibility on Twitter. So you've already accomplished that by replying to your own tweet in the form of a thread. I'd like to invite everyone to submit their story today. Go to untoldwomen.com. Don't think too much about it. If there's a story inside you that's dying to get out, please submit it. You can go and click on submit your story. Some guidelines for you: keep your story focused on a theme. So you don't have to tell your life story, because the story is actually, we're looking for 300 words or less. So focus on an experience, an incident, an anecdote. Focus on yourself versus your services or what your organization does. So this is more about you and what we can learn from you. So you can fill out the form and submit. And you can also look at other stories that we have on the website, just to look at other samples. This is one by an ER doctor in Toronto, Dr. Noor Khatib. There's one from Hanan bin Kalouk in Dubai. She works with entrepreneurs. This is another one by Dr. Ko herself, on the power of storytelling to share science. And she actually makes a really good point about how when we share our stories, we raise the stories of others, because if you want others to speak up, you have to speak up first. You have to have the courage to speak up and tell your story. And with that, I'll wrap up with my favorite tagline: own your story, tell your story, and share your story.